personal question because it is truly my life.
Mhm.
And I never thought in a million years I would be at this age and at this stage of life and not married and no children. And I have gone through several thoughts of frustration and impatience and wondering and dating and all of that stuff. And what I know to be true is that whether I am single or married, my relationship with God has got to be number one.
Yes. Good afternoon, good morning to you. So I'm in South Africa, and it's a public holiday today.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Heritage Day. So I'm actually at home. Yeah, and I'm relaxing. That's why I'm relaxed, you know. But you are all the way in the US, and where are you?
Yes. I am in Atlanta, Georgia. Which is, if you're looking at the country of the US, I am in the southeast portion of the country. Georgia is. Yes, the state of Georgia.
It's very hot here. And how's Atlanta, Georgia? Are you guys going into winter, fall, you call it?
We just entered into fall or autumn. Yes.
Great stuff.
This week, yes.
I'm looking forward to the presentation. So let me not be rude and introduce you to my viewers, of course, and those who will be partaking in this conversation today. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome my esteemed guest, Charlene Evans, affectionately known as Chiccy Baritone, a poet, professional, a speaker, and we'll get into that. I'm very honored to have her today, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored. It's so good to see you. It's been several years since we actually talked to each other, 2014 to be exact.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
Yes.
I'm sure a lot has changed. So maybe tell me, what are you working on now? Last time we met, we were at some university and you were doing like a tour. And we met there. I think it was the Unmasked concert. And then we started there. And so I know you've been working, you went to the traveling. And so what are you up to now?
So right now I am revamping or rebirthing my podcast. I released the podcast back in 2018. And it was not a visual podcast. It was just my voice and content that I wanted to discuss, and decided to take a break from it, kind of really think about how I wanted to move it forward. And so I have repackaged it, revamped it. I've updated the logo for the podcast, but the podcast is called Brew with Miss Baritone. So that will be kicking off in October next month with my special guest, and it's all going to be video. So it's live streaming of the podcast will be done on my YouTube channel, which is Brew with Miss Baritone, and also on Facebook. So I've been working on that. I've also am on my third book that I'm working on. It's called Diaries of the Corporate Black Woman, Let the Truth Be Told. So professionally, I'm an engineer, project control specialist, and I'm currently working as a cost engineer for a major program here in the city. And I have 20 plus years of corporate experience that I want to share. And I actually have interviewed from last July up until this year, several people who are telling their stories. So these are several Black women who have had issues with discrimination, racism, colorism. I'm protecting their identities, obviously. And they have gave me permission to tell their stories. So it's a compilation book with several interviews of women telling their stories, but these are not just sob stories of what happened. It's also stories of triumph. As a result of going through that, what happened? Did you get into that department you wanted to get into? Did you launch that business? Did you leave corporate America and started something else? So it's really it's telling my 20 myself 20 years ago what I would have wanted to know now 20 years later. So I'm very excited about that.
I'm quite excited about it. In fact, this morning I was at a bookstore and I saw, there were quite a few books about women and corporate and the struggles, and I noticed there's like a swell, there's a movement there that I see that women are, speaking up. I've got girls, so I'm excited to see such things because
Yes.
I'm hoping for a world where my girls will grow up with strong black women leading, managing. So I'm glad that you are paving the way. In that, I mean, I think we'll go into that a bit later because I wanted to ask you about women in particular. But before we get into that, for those who don't know you, so you introduced yourself as there's a professional, there's the spoken word artist, there is the speaker. And do people get you confused? I mean, in your different circles, how do you hold the different? You're like well, I suppose you do many things. Now you documentary, podcasting. You must be intimidating. I mean, do people confuse you? Do you intimidate people?
No, I think I try to be very mindful. The longer I discovered my gift of poetry and how I wanted God to utilize me in all of these different arenas, it can be confusing because they're like, are you Charlene or are you Chiccy? Which one are you? And I'm both.
Yeah.
It depends on the assignment.
Yeah.
And I have been able to marry the two in certain assignments, and then certain assignments, they're very clearly defined.
Yeah.
So the right brain, the left brain and right brain, which is where I operate strongly, professionally, I'm left, and artistically, I'm right. I try to make sure I clearly define those two people, those two roles as it relates to the assignments.
Yeah.
But the person is the same.
Yeah.
What I do when I speak as a poet and as a professional, you can ask people on both of those sides of the world, and they might not know about the poet or they might not know about the engineer, but they know about this girl named Charlene Evans, and she's Chiccy Baritone. So I think that's very important to be who I am, regardless of the assignment and regardless of whether I am in a professional setting or if I'm doing poetry.
I like that. I like that very much because I think it's very often the audience that confuses. People want to box you. So I mean,
Yes.
are you the poet? Are you the professional? Are you the speaker? Are you this or that? But you live your life as yourself. So I like what you're saying about the assignment. So at a particular point, if I have to just do one thing, then I can do that. But I'm by myself. You go home, you think, you don't separate the different parts.
That's right.
of it. So I love how you describe it. And so part of what I wanted to talk about is so I work with a lot of people who struggle with anxiety and stuff like that. And so in your profession, I think you are exposed to those different elements. And maybe where does the story begin? Where you learned to carry yourself. I mean, you're very confident. You stand on stages, you coach people, you inspire people, but I wonder, has it always been that way? Or I mean, did it take us back to how it started, and how did you grow into this woman?
So very good question. I started in the pageant world. So when I first introduced myself as the poet Chiccy Baritone, of course, I was inundated with, what is that? What are you? Where do you came from? Where did that come from? And still ask that, because it's not like everyone still knows who I am. So I never get tired of telling the story. But I was in a lot of pageants in high school, and there were opportunities to do talents, and I never knew what I wanted to do. But I loved and enjoyed reading poetry. So I started doing monologues. The monologues in pageants, once I graduated from high school, turned into me journaling and writing poetry in college. Never told anybody about it, just kind of kept it to myself. And because I wrote and journaled a lot, that turned into discovering the gift of poetry. People started approaching me about it. Now that's the gifting of it all. How I carry myself and the woman that you see is really credit to God Almighty and my mom and dad. They did a really good job and instilling values within me and my brothers and sisters, telling us and being very open and honest about the world we live in as it relates to racism. It exists, but it doesn't mean you have to participate. So I'm very, very, my roots with God and understanding that God is love is very important in how I carry myself and how my gift is ushered, because God was very intentional when he gave it to me. Words are very powerful. So Proverbs 18:21, the power of death and life in the tongue is what I stand on, and I take it very serious. Words have a responsibility, that you have a responsibility to those words once you release them out of your mouth.
Yeah.
So I never wavered. Once I was very mindful of the gift and who I was as a woman and as a person. I was always mindful. I don't have to be different for people to like what I do and who I am. I just need to go forth in the gift and continue to pray and ask God to guide me through the gift as I grow up in the gift. So the woman you see now is who I have always been, because of me understanding my identity is in God first. And my parents did a great job raising me. And once I understood my assignment, I went forth. You know, I have a poem called Counterfeit. And Counterfeit talks about people feeling like they have to put on a facade. And specifically that poem is in relation to dating, but it really is a concept that happens regardless. It doesn't have to be a intimate situation, a dating situation, but people in corporate America do it all the time. Everyday people in your family, some of your friends feel like they have to be someone that they're not, and you don't. You really don't. So knowing who you are, walking in your truth is very important.
I mean, you give some wonderful insights there, and what I watching you, because I mean, I watch you, I watch what you do, and I've always thought you were this strong person. Even now, when you were explaining, I was wondering, but was it always that way? And then you mentioned that you've always had your identity, and then from there, then you could understand your assignment, and currently, I think we live in a society where what pays stays. People will do anything they will mold themselves, contort themselves to sort of fit whatever, to make money, to get ahead, to get likes. But somehow you've remained steady. And my question to you then, as somebody who usually, I mean, you perform, right? You stand in front of people, you speak. How did you maintain your word, your truth, your path, your identity, and not wanting to change your words to fit maybe the audience, to fit the circumstance? How is it that you maintain that as somebody who stands in front of people?
It's such a good question, because I don't believe there's not an artist living that has not felt that pressure or even succumbed to that pressure. And I had to grow up in my gift, meaning there were moments where my feelings was hurt. There were moments where I felt like I was really fish out of water in certain situations. I felt like I could do poetry anywhere. I'm not going to curse in my poetry. I'm going to make my point. But it didn't matter where that set was. If it was in a club and there was drinking and smoking and cursing going on, I was going to, if it was an open mic there, I was going. Because, hey, I want to do my poetry. And as you can imagine, I wasn't always received. They're like, what is this church girl? What is this girl doing? What is she doing? What is she talking about? And there were moments where I was not received. But my prayer has been this: if you touch one person in this whole room, now your harvest might not come up immediately. It might not happen before you leave. But just know in your heart that God told you to do it, you did it, and you did. You touched somebody. And I have been in some situations where I didn't get booed, but it was real quiet after I would finish a poem. And I'm like, but God, I did what you told me to do. It don't feel good, but I did it. And then it will be that one person that's sitting at the bar, or it'd be that person that's sitting in the back of the club, and they'll stop me at the door, or they'll come by my table and they'll say, you were talking to me. You said something, or I'm struggling with fornication. I'm struggling with this guy I'm dating right now, I'm struggling with a lot of cursing and profanity. I can't stop drinking. And they'll just come and they'll testify. And God didn't have to do that every time for me. He did it one time, maybe 2, 3, 4 times, a couple of times to get the point across to me that you do what I say to do, because at the end of the day, this is what I gave you to do. And because I want to please him and because I love him, I'll do it. But it has not been a comfortable journey. And I have had to always take myself back to my roots when I am in environments where I feel outnumbered. Outnumbered meaning everybody ain't getting it. It's not something that's clicking. They hear it. They might like the way I look, but they don't like what I'm saying. It's a variety of things that you notice as an artist, but you don't necessarily have to entertain it.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, because I think you're being real. Very very often people see you like almost in your final form, right? And they think that's how it
Oh,
always has been. But you've walked a
no.
certain journey, and you came. Maybe tell us a little bit about maybe the hard times. Have you ever went where you did not want to go, or you found the audience intimidating, or but just like I don't feel like doing this, or have you always thought, so long as I can touch one person, I'm going?
Yeah, so it could work both ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be uncomfortable in a bad situation. You can be uncomfortable in a good situation. I'm gonna tell you about that. So I was uncomfortable in a really good poetry situation. I was one of several artists who opened up for Michelle Obama. And this is when President Barack Obama was campaigning. They had a stop at a church in Columbia. And when I came on that stage, it had to be about 500 women in the room. And for me, being nervous, and I've been doing this 20 plus years, I had to learn that being nervous meant I depended on God to do what he gave me to do. I had to learn how to channel being nervous. So what I normally do, especially when I know the layout of a program, I separate myself, I breathe, I pray, I speak out loud, because it's very important to hear yourself, encourage yourself. Just like David said, I encouraged myself. God, thank you for the opportunity. God, thank you that I'm here. God, please help me touch somebody. Getting to a place of surrender in your nervousness. Because when you do that, the dependency on God is what people experience. And it's very humbling and it's very powerful. And it reaches people where they are. And they're like, man, you are amazing. You are amazing. I'm like, that was God. God did it. God did it. You felt his spirit, because I became lower so that he can be higher. And as an artist, it's very important to do whatever you need to do to get to that place, because it has been moments where I was cocky about it. I was cocky because I remembered that poem and people patting you on your back and, oh, you're great, you're grand, and all that stuff. And then to one of your questions about forgetting your words, like what do you do when you, and that has happened in those moments of cockiness. So God had to remind me, this is my gift that I gave to you. And this is not about you. This is about you giving the gift so that I may be glorified. And this is really bigger than you. I have given gifts to every creation, and this assignment that I've assigned everyone is bigger than you. It's just that you were assigned to do it, and you got to always keep that in mind. Yes, rejoice and be excited, and thank God for opportunities, but you also have to be humble about the fact that this is bigger. This is always, not just right now, but it is always going to be bigger than us. So I was extremely intimidated when I walked out, because I did not know how many people were going to be there, and the crowd went crazy. It was a poem I did called Gap. That's like my signature poem, and the women loved it. And to God be the glory. All of these women with gaps were coming up to me after the conference. I have struggled with my gap. And da, 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 da. So intimidation and being scared to do, or not scared, but just fearful, or maybe feeling not wanting to do certain events. It's not just bad ones. I wanted to show and display to your audience that it could be great situations that you struggle in.
Yeah, I like how you bring both sides, right? In that how sometimes you think it's bad when it's really bad, but things could be going very well, and you you struggle with that. And I was just thinking now, I mean, sometimes it's hard when you're good, right? When you're like brilliant, when you do this thing, to be humble, to say, yeah, I need to be humble, but I got this, right? And other times where you struggled, what was your process like? I mean, you talk about being humbled. Did you go home and reflect? Did you pray a bit more? How did you work over it? Where your day didn't go well at the office.
I do a lot of reflecting. I'm a writer first before I ever open my mouth. And a lot of times, as I have grown, because it's different when you start out, you do things a certain way. And then as you grow in your gift and as you grow as a person, you realize that certain ways you do things don't work the same. Writing on a notepad was like what I did and how I did it. And that turned into the laptop, and that turned now what. As I'm a little older, I like to talk into my voice recorder. I like to go back and listen to the things that I've been thinking about and reflecting. That's like my verbal diary now. I do a lot of stuff with the voice recorder, but I also have great mentorship. As an artist and as a person, that is my lifeline. And when I mentor young people, whether it's with poetry or whether it's from the professional sector, I always tell them the misconception that you have been told is mentorship is good when you're young. And that's a lie. It is necessary for all of your life to have mentorship. And mentorship is very important because they really allow you to dismiss a lot of mistakes that can be damaging to you spiritually, emotionally, and financially. So with a lot of great mentorship, I've been able to deal with and have that mirror back at me, because my mentors are not impressed by me. And you want to make sure you have someone in your life who's not impressed by you, but they can speak life into you and speak it in love, because it's coming from a great place. That has been another stable in my life that has helped me propel professionally and personally, and also through my poetry.
Yeah, I like that. You remind me of I was on TV once, right? And so I was excited. I was on the show, and so I was at the studio, and then so when I came home, so my wife tells me, right, when I was on TV, she said, she told my daughter, look, daddy's on TV. And my daughter said, no, I don't care, just put Mickey Mouse on, right? She wanted to. And she texts this, and she texts me, and I kept that because that's what I wanted to remember, like mentors and family members, people who are not really impressed by you, who can always tell you, like, you're losing your way. That wasn't really that, but so I like what you're saying, and it's throughout life that you need those people across your life. We're going to go into the poems, but before then, right, what I wanted to ask is, so yeah, the spoken word artist, and then you do Toastmasters, right? How come? I mean, you had this experience, right? Why do that? Because Toastmasters has a structure, and because that, I don't know, does it relate to the mentoring that you understood your assignment, you were preparing? Why that? Why Toastmasters when you perform and all that?
Because Toastmasters, and I was a part of the Toastmasters team at my office for 3 years prior to COVID hitting, and now I'm working at a client site, and I just joined their Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a crazy animal because it challenges me as an artist, because when you're an artist, you can say it how you want to say it, with not having to deal with the grammar police. You can use the slang. You can, become relatable to people from all walks of life and say it how you want to say it. And you're going to only reach a certain audience when you do that. Well, with Toastmasters and knowing that I enjoyed speaking, I wanted to also appeal to another audience. I wanted to also have opportunities that would broaden my horizon, that I could be able to box and bring poetry into those environments and bring public speaking into my poetry environments. Because what I do realize is you have several different types of readers. Everyone that reads, some people want to see proper grammar in poetry, and most of the time, those are the people that support the work the most. People who are readers and love books and still love the feel of books. I'm one of those people, by the way.
Yeah, I'm one of those people as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a hardcover, soft cover. Well, I have ebooks, but it's just not the same. I got to touch the pages.
Yeah.
But Toastmasters really arrested me in how I view public speaking, even when I'm doing poetry. It trained me to think about how I want to present certain poetry opportunities. If I am in a corporate setting, I want to be able to do a poem that everyone will be able to hear, relate to, and not have to try to figure out. Just knowing that there's different sets of audiences and wanting to appeal to different sets of audiences. And professionally, it has been good for my development. Toastmasters touched a lot of different areas of my life. Some I knew it would touch, and then other areas I had no idea. But if you are a writer, it is never a bad idea to get correct, checked, and really mentored in how you write, how you speak, because at any point in your life, you're going to have to do public speaking in some shape, form, or fashion. And I personally think everyone should do Toastmasters. It shouldn't be just a specific type of group, because it really does help with your public speaking. Now, I have done well in Toastmasters, but please don't hold it against me, because I don't always use proper grammar when I'm speaking, and the and so and all of those things that I would normally get, banged at in Toastmasters scoring, because I'm saying it, because they take account of everything. Like, it's really a strict structure of how to speak. I'm fully aware when I'm in that mode of speaking, I'm very conscious of that. But when I'm normally having certain dialogues, I don't always use proper grammar.
And partly this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I think you are doing something brave. I think many people take it for granted, right? In that when you see somebody stand on stage, deliver a talk, it's a spoken word piece, or you talk in front of people. I think a lot of people think it's, oh, she does it so well, but there's been a journey, like, emotionally having to grow, which also says something about you, about, I suppose, if somebody's anxious and they try to speak in front of people, I think people struggle with being judged. Is my grammar is my grammar okay? Am I standing okay? Is my outfit okay? Is my English okay? Is the idea being delivered okay? And for you as an artist who's been around a little bit to subject yourself to that, I think it says something about your own confidence. How you're okay with growing. So I like that. And I wanted to, maybe then, you as a professional, right? So you're an engineer.
By trade, yes.
By trade. And do you, because it's like almost two, it's like different worlds, right? And
Yes.
when you meet engineers, they they don't really talk much. They want proper things and structure. And what kind of engineer
Yes.
are you? And how does your speaking filter into that space?
So my background's electrical engineering, and from electrical engineering, I went into project controls, which people say, what is that? And in the simplest way, it's, I help control the project. What I do is in my title. So project controls helps control the project and help controlling a project in cost and scheduling. And currently on this project that I'm working on now, I'm a cost engineer. So I have had the opportunity to cross over in different parts of engineering. But it is very interesting. When I had the opportunity to get nominated for TEDx Greenville, because I am asked so much, how in the world can an engineer be a poet? Like, how do you, it doesn't even go together. And so I heard it so much that I decided to do a poem about it. And that was the TED talk that I did, or the TED, I was a performer for TEDx. So when I did it, I wanted to explain it in the simplest form, but make it funny, make it, kind of appeal to different people who probably get asked it all the time. They don't necessarily have to be a poet, but they just, if they're an artist and they're engineer, that's just still awkward to a lot of people. Because like you said, most engineers are really, really, strict into the book. And I am like that too. It's crazy. I am, but I also have a personality to where I am very free forming my thoughts, the way I construct things, artistically, whether it's writing or whether it's stuff with my voice. I have thrown myself in situations. I'm now getting into voice acting. So it is really becoming comfortable. It goes back to that identity thing you and I talked about, knowing who you are, saying, you know what, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. If I believe that principle, if I believe that scripture, then I can apply that in whatever God has pointed me out to do. Charlene, this is next. Okay, God, this is weird. I don't see myself doing it, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I know who I am in you. And so having those self-talks is just very important. And speaking in engineering audiences can be very intimidating, and very intimidating speaking with my colleagues. But that's where Toastmaster comes into play. So it's pulling from this variety that you have created for your own life to be able to apply it where needed, and always having an attitude of being a student. I don't ever feel like I just know it all because I know a lot. And if people can really deal with that part of them, I know a lot, but you don't know it all. And if you always keep this posture of a student, God can use you mightily. And I believe that is what I'm experiencing because I keep a posture of being a student.
Thank you very much. I like that. So where I wanted to take it to now is you being a woman, and like where we are in the world, right? I mean, you're going to, your third book is coming out, and it's for me. Then the issue is about voice, right? When I was going through Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, there's a section in the book where she explains it this way. She says, it's like when you're a woman, when you grow up, there are these moments where your voice is slowly taken away. It's like you are taught to keep quiet, keep quiet, keep quiet. There's this content that you walk on, and then by the time you reach adulthood, you don't speak. And so you are doing something in that line as well. I see that you also care about women's issues and things like that. So just with women in general and speaking, what are your thoughts though?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. And the mentorship piece has been very, very intricate and very important, that I keep women around me of different arenas of my life who use their voices. The struggle with my voice in corporate America was the reason why I wrote the book. It didn't matter how well I spoke. It didn't matter the tone of my voice. It didn't matter me being quiet in moments. I was still having to deal with being judged by the color of my skin, not the content of my character, not what I can do to solve problems, but just basically who I am. I learned early on, and this is a part of the book that I am discussing and spending some time laboring in is the importance of documentation. Because what I have learned as a woman, when you keep tight documentation on events that are going on in corporate America, and I'm just going to talk corporate since that's where we're at.
Yeah.
I would speak after, like my voice was the choir and my documentation was the lead singer.
Mm-hmm.
And when I let it that way, because people have a tendency to believe something that is written down before they hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I began to embrace documentation, because it's king in my life, from 18, 19 years old, up until this point, I live and die by it. I write everything down. I timestamp certain things depending on what it is. And when I am in a situation to where I have to plead my case, I let my documentation speak and then I speak. I back up what I write because people will believe documentation first before they believe your voice. And that gave me the fortitude to go forward when I started realizing that it was helping me move forward. When I also realized that sitting here and trying to make someone believe who I am based off my voice alone, that didn't work well in corporate America because we are dealing with a lot of judgment of things that are external to your voice. So when I began to embrace that and utilize it and apply that to my career in corporate America, things shifted and things changed. From my performance evaluations to the opportunities I was afforded, to people believing me when things were done to me wrong, because I have been documenting and being quiet about it. And when I was presented an opportunity to plead my case, my documentation spoke. And that is something that a lot of young people need to understand, that emotional intelligence, now I'm seeing that on job requirements. Can you believe that? We're in a day and time now where they are as saying as things required for a job is emotional intelligence. Yeah, it's a soft skill that they don't talk about. They tell you all these things you need to know as an engineer and all these things I need to have, you know, from an education standpoint, a certification standpoint, but then there are a lot of people who are not emotionally intelligent. So a lot of the documentation and really being aware of the arena. Some arenas you go in are fixed, and there are some arenas you're going to go in and you need to figure out what you need to receive from that arena and not try to spend so much of your life trying to change it. And when you really understand that and not look at that as a negative, but a positive thing, then it really can lighten the stress and the load of what you will experience because of being in an arena as it relates to your skin, as it relates to your gender. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it is still like that. I'm 20 years post going through these things I'm going through, and there are 20-year-olds that still can't believe that that was my story 20 years ago. They don't believe it. They're like, yeah, really? That's still going on? Yes. And it's no different. As a matter of fact, it's in cycles. It's in cycles. But how you, because you are the only person you can control in that cycle. What are the tools that you're using to get what you need to get out of that cycle and not have it be a negative experience in your life? While there were negative things that happened in that arena, there were a lot of amazing things that happened in that arena for me.
I like that, you know, I think because you're touching on the themes of balance and knowing how to your own boundaries, you know, understanding how the system works and understanding how to, you know, how to move in the space. And what you're also alluding to is the fact that the same struggles that were there long ago, you say 20 years, I bet even people before you had the same stories and the stuff is still happening now. And, you know, I'm looking forward to the podcast because I was going to go maybe one day because of the time, you know, I want to go into your text. I was going to maybe ask you about, just women and just engineering and the corporate space, but I think we'll make time for that in particular. But just one last thing that I really wanted to ask you
Yes.
before we can look at both pieces. I quite enjoyed them. Just
Okay.
a word to single women who, sometimes think God is taking too long. God is taking too long with that man, with that baby, with that job. And I asked because I've got some experience in this area, and I just thought some women should say something about this because there are people struggling out there. So, a word of wisdom, of encouragement to a young lady feeling as if God is taking too long, my things are not working out, so I'm going to change myself because my time is running out.
Yes. That is a personal journey. That's a very personal question because it is truly my life. And I never thought in a million years I would be at this age and at this stage of life and not married and no children. And I have gone through several thoughts of frustration and impatience and wondering and dating and all of that stuff. And what I know to be true is that whether I am single or married, my relationship with God has got to be number one. Has to be number one. If you have spending so much time trying to add something to your life and your life currently is not representing the most important relationship, it's going to be very difficult to take on another person because you can speak on this, that becoming one, the time is probably easiest to become one or to hear that was probably at the altar. Once you had to put that in motion, you are now dedicated and committed to spending a life being one in every phase and season of your life and the life of your wife. And that is not easy, according to what my married friends tell me, obviously. But occupying and fulfilling the things that God has asked of you, single lady, single man, in your quiet time. He did not create you to worry about what's next, what's next, what's next. He really wants you to labor in what he has assigned you to do right now. And I think that we spend so much time worrying about a tomorrow that we're not promised. And when I put it in that perspective, and when I really think that thing through, I'm not promised tomorrow, but I'm worried about something that I might not even live to see. When I can do something about my life right now, today, that keeps a lot of the desires at bay. Now, it's not unhealthy and it's not bad to desire it, but you do not want a blessing prematurely. Because what I also do know is that, it's a horrible thing to prematurely have something that was intended to be a blessing, but it ends up being a burden. And so with so many thoughts, I can't, continue to speak on with that. I really just have to sum it up to, we really have to focus on our relationship with God. And I know that's not what people want to hear, but there are some of the most amazing seasons of singleness that I know I would not have experienced with a mate. And God also, another fact that people don't want to hear is we're not all promised to be married. We're not all promised that. It's nowhere in the word that God says that. So when we think about that, it's a gift and an honor to have the experience of marriage, but we should not live our life to be married. God has something in front of you right now that you can do something about, and that is doing what he has created you to do. And the joy and the fulfillment that comes out of honoring that is where your time needs to be. So it's not, I have had to be content. I've had to learn to be content. And it's no better state to be in. It's not better to be single versus married. It's not better to be married versus single. And Paul was very clear. He had to be content. He learned to be content. And you have to learn to be content, because you do not know what tomorrow holds, but you know who holds tomorrow. And if you trust him and love him with your life, whether you come out of this life single or married, it was what God intended. And you just got to trust that.
Yeah, you see, there's a problem with asking a speaker, right? Then you'll be dropping some truth bombs and dropping daggers in people's hearts.
I gotta give it to you straight, no chaser.
But we haven't spoken for so long. The time is just running. So you sent two pieces. We can go into them if the time allows for you. I'm fine. But I don't know which one you want to start with. Because part of what I wanted to do here is, when I hear somebody speak, I often wonder, their process and what did they mean and what does that line mean. And so you send two pieces. I suppose one about the pandemic, one about how we speak and things of that nature. Which one? You love. I forgot to say you're a coffee lover as well, because you and
I am.
Partly that's why you named your podcast.
Brew with Miss Baritone, right?
So which one, in terms of text, in terms of your thoughts, what can we look at and what can we talk about with one of your pieces?
So we can talk about pandemic. I would love for you to pick out a line or two that you want to discuss specifically, but pandemic, I think, will forever at this point hold a special place in my heart. This is a time in our lives that, we'll be, able to go back in history, hopefully, and get past this completely to talk about a time in life that we lived through and unfortunately not a lot of people lived through. And while I was going through my moment of the pandemic, I was chipping away at writing about my experience, the experience of others, and just experience in general. And that poem was written over a 3-month period. And I executive produced it, the audio, the music part that you hear to the poem.
By the way, awesome. I was just looking at the visuals. I thought this is beautiful. Opening scene in front of it's a church building, right? The bells, the music, it changes. The video, wow, I thought, wow, there is great stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I've worked with some really talented people, but all those things you see and hear, God was dropping that in my spirit. And my thing is, I don't have the gift of producing in the manner in which someone's physically putting their hands on keyboards and arrangements and programming and all that. I hear it, I communicate it, and they make it happen for me. And so the engineer that I worked with, I've worked with him on several projects, but all of those changes and shifts and keys and all that stuff you hear, I communicated that. That was what God gave me. And I'm just so pleased by how it all turned out. And I think I wanted to create something because it had such an impact on me that I can go back and say there was a moment in time that we went through a pandemic and I wrote about it because I felt like it was just so powerful, and just the changes I went through as someone single, no husband, no child, no dog, no cat, no nothing, no movement, and literally working from home and dealing with mental health. Never really, you've always had these avenues, right, to get out and do stuff. But when we went into complete lockdown, you had to deal with your mental health. And the writing, I'm a poet and I'm a reader and all of that, but that got old. After a while, I really had gotten very challenged mentally with my thoughts. I feel like I have no options. What do I do with that, God? I feel like I can't interact with people. People really realize the importance of touch and hugs and embracing and people who were closed in together going through the pandemic, they realized how much they didn't know about each other. And they realized things that they really didn't talk about or they hid. They had opportunities to hide things in their heart that they never shared in the house.
Mm.
And they had these avenues where they can go out and deal with it, but not have to focus on it because of the external component was open.
Yeah.
So now it's closed and you're home and you're together. And what do you do with that time?
Yeah.
So it challenged marriages. It challenged single people. It challenged every component of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to write about it.
Yeah, you did. In fact, as you described it, I see the visuals because and your first line catches me, right? I'm gonna read your own poem to you. I wonder how that will go. It's just a few lines, right? And you say, I mean, everything has a genesis and an end. Genesis, Adam, Eve, betrayal. That led to the beginning of sin, humanity, birth into iniquity, and spreading it just like a virus to our descendants and generations to come. Coronavirus. Carrier number one turns into millions and counting. I thought that was a beautiful, carrier number one turns into millions. And because you started at the beginning, your very first line though gets me in that everything that has a beginning has an end. For me, it's quite a profound line, and I wonder what you were trying to communicate with that, because I started thinking also of grief, because in one sense it could be everything has a genesis and an end, in that this virus has started, but it will end somehow. But some of us were grieving people, and were you reflecting on that, or were you reflecting more that this season that we're in terms of the virus, it'll start and it'll end?
I was trying to use imagery and analogy to state the case of the beginning of sin and the beginning of the virus. And you and I both know that you control the component of sin to a degree. When I pray at night, a part of my prayer is, God, forgive me for the sins I committed knowingly and unknowingly, right? Because we still have the human component. So there is what we call an end, and then there are things we have to work through when remnants of what we thought was over still keeps coming up. So while I believe that the virus will subside, will it completely subside? It will subside to a point to where it's not like the flu. They talk about the flu kind of subsided. It kind of like went away for a second, but you and I both know there were still people catching the flu, but it just wasn't on this grand scale. And the part you play in that, right? So there's a human irresponsibility that goes into contracting a virus and spreading sin. So I really tried to do the comparison of sin in the earth and the creation of life and the beginning of a virus, and how it turned out to how they do with the CDC. You have one reported case, and then that one reported case turns into, now it's 2, and now it's from 2 to 200, and now it's 855, and now it's 10,000. So that is just how quickly sin can spread in the earth, and has, because we were created in iniquity. Just walking you through something that happened that God did in order, and then looking at and comparing that to the fact that this happened, whether man-made or not, because we don't want to get into all of that. But whether man-made or not, this virus entered this world. And this virus was spread through human interaction. And we were responsible of how the spread happened, whether we took precautionary measures or not. It took on a life of its own, and many people were killed as a result of it. And there are acts of sin that have affected people's lives forever, which also can be tied into, we could even throw grieving in that and make it a try. We can talk about the virus, we can talk about sin, and we can talk about grieving. And I believe I can connect that triangle, because there's so many things with grief that can tie into that.
No, you see, and that's why precisely I wanted to talk about it in a way that you explained it. I think we miss so much And as somebody who'd perform it, and then you break it down, I'm like, wow. I actually just taking it a bit further. Are you an anti-vaxxer? No, I'm kidding. Don't answer that. Don't answer that. I said, did you vaccinate or not? But it's a big thing for us here. We fight about it and all that. But maybe then just
Oh, everyone's fighting about it.
yeah. Well, is it one jab or two jabs or booster 2 and 3? Where is it going? Right, one turns into a million. So the other line that caught my attention, right, is when you said, God, your love is the remedy. And because part of, I was listening to the radio the other day, and a gentleman called in, and he said that, life, humankind, the history of humankind happens in stages. And right now, the scientists are the people we must listen to, because the priests at one point were in charge, but now the scientists are in charge. I ask this to say, just in terms of how people wanted to fellowship and people's thoughts around God, but how come you don't help us with this, and why did I lose this person at this time? I mean, so I find that people have some very difficult and difficult questions with themselves, with God, and God, did I misunderstand? And so when you say, God, your love is the remedy, I know of people who are struggling with God in the pandemic, and what are your thoughts on that, and what were you trying to communicate? Because you went into the PPE, just describing, playing with the metaphor, how God protects us, and what are your thoughts on that?
That's a very difficult question and thought. But what I'm going to tell you, my thought on it, because there's really no right answer, and a lot of it we don't know. God is extremely sovereign, and God has a mystery about him, I believe, on purpose. And the ones who believe him and are calling themselves believers and trust him, even when they don't understand it. They know it is for their good. We can look back on our lives and we can go back to experiences that made absolutely no sense. And then in hindsight, now when we look at what God did with it, it made perfect sense. But it was in his timing as to when he wanted to unveil that. When I say his love is a remedy, I can't dismiss the fact that I witnessed a level of love in humanity that we did not ever witness to or experience before the pandemic. And that only proved to me that when people love the way God loves during this time at the height of the pandemic, it was truly all we needed. It was a sacredness to that I will never forget. People who never spoken to each other, neighbors buying neighbors' groceries, reaching out and getting masks, handing them sanitizer, making sure they're okay, checking on people. I mean, it went on for during a period where it was undeniable that God was trying to get our attention. I can't ignore that part about the pandemic. The pandemic has a lot of, distractions to it, but the element of love, when people showed the love of God in this pandemic at its height, I would never forget it. I would never forget, having groceries delivered to my house, or, people just say, hey, be safe, take care, dropping my stuff off, I would never forget so many things that I saw and witnessed with my own eyes of the core of humanity, people operating in the spirit of God. And without a shadow of a doubt, knowing that God, even in the midst of it, he was still there with us. And while I can't soothe the hearts and the frustration of the people who have experienced death in the pandemic. What I can say is we have trusted God through some horrible times in life, and the Bible speaks of it. So if you are a believer, we should not approach this thing as if it's so foreign. It's not. It's not foreign. So the trust of who God is in the earth is really what has sustained me and kept me. Not calling people all the time or whenever it gets hard, and like all those things are great. But when I am here by myself and there is no way to reach someone or no one's available, he has sustained me and kept me. And people that have been left behind, what they can say is, even though I would have never wanted this thing to turn out this way, you can find something in your situation to say, he sustained me, he kept me. He kept me, he sustained me, and I'm still here, and I don't understand it all, but I trust him. I trust him with my life.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said, you took me somewhere. So I'm asking the questions, but when you're responding to me, you're taking me somewhere. I think it's maybe, I suppose it's an appropriate time to pause it here. I also want to be respectful of time. I asked you for an hour. And so I don't know if there's maybe a closing comments or if you thoughts regarding anything we spoke about today or the piece itself. I would have loved to go into the other one. Hopefully, if this was nice enough, we can meet at some other point to go line by line, you know.
Yes.
But for now, any parting shots, closing thoughts for those who are afraid to take on the stages of life, those who've been given platforms, who've been asked to do certain things, who've been given certain gifts, and they are anxious and they are concerned about themselves. Any final words for people like that who struggle maybe with anxiety and not maybe taking up their responsibility or the platforms that have been given to them?
Anxiety is real. Nervousness, fear is real. And it's very important to be honest about the trigger of that. Where is it coming from? What's the root? Because to try to overcome something that you're not trying to figure out the root of is counterproductive. It's counterproductive. As an engineer, I could come up with all these amazing ways to fix something, but if I don't get to the root of the issue, I'm spending more time and money only to come back to the same conclusion. And for people who deal with anxiety, once you get to a point to where you're honest, because I believe a lot of times we just don't want to, a lot of times when you say it out loud what the issue is, now you've got to confront it. Now you got to deal with it. And even talking through what you like, if you don't really know how to pinpoint it, talking it out, writing it out, recording it, do something different to get a different result. Once you have come to that point, you can then begin to do the hard things. But you got to be very honest with where that anxiety and where that nervousness and where that fear is residing. That fear and anxiety and nervousness has a residence. It has a full layout. It has a house. It has curtains. And you got to find out where it lives. And some of the greatest moments of your life is literally on the other side of all those things. Once you get to the root, just like they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You take it one bite at a time. And the pressures of life and social media, people will make you feel like you're behind just based off of a well-scripted story or narrative that they're choosing to show you. Your chapter of life, you thinking you're behind, is totally different than someone else's chapter, because God had to do something different in you than someone else. So taking your eyes off of what you see being selective about what you hear and going inward and dealing with your heart, dealing with God, the Spirit of God in you, getting quiet, getting still, because a lot of people don't like to sit still. You see how quiet it is in here? It's like this in my place most of the time. I rarely turn my TV on. I'll turn it on and watch I have a couple shows I watch, but during the week, it's quiet because it helps to settle your spirit. There's so much noise in the world. And sometimes even as artists, I know for me personally, I create in silence. Some artists like to have a lot of stuff going on and some instrumental, this and that. I create in silence because that's in that place that God speaks. So get to a place where God can speak and you can audibly hear him, like audibly, I say audibly, but where your heart can hear him. And I believe getting to the residence of your anxiety and your stress and your fear, you'll begin to break that residence down and you'll begin to clear that space. And you have to do that for yourself. And that is not putting a timeline or a timetable or any kind of parameters on that. It's actually just getting started. Just get started. And that is what I would leave with people. Everything you need is inside of you. And you have to deal with yourself in order to be at a place where you can enjoy God and enjoy the things that he has destined for you to do. People want to jump straight to the reward and bypass the process. And that is just not how life works. If God couldn't do it on earth when he was a man, then surely we can't. We can't. It's a process.
Thank you very much. I mean, so starting there with identifying the root cause, one idea you're sharing. The other one reminded me of a quote. I think it says something like, when we describe our monsters, they cease to be monsters. And so confronting whatever it is that you're struggling with and, beginning somewhere. Thank you very much. Much appreciated, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Charlene Evans, a.k.a. Chiccy Baritone. It was wonderful just chatting with you. All the best with the book, with
Thank
the podcast, and we'll keep up.
Absolutely. We'll definitely get together and do this again. And I would love to have you on the podcast. We can talk about that later, but I would love to have you on. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because the podcast is touching several areas of life, from the professional and art side, and you as an author. I have mad respect for your work, the work you do as an author, and in your profession as well. And so we will definitely get together, but thank you for having me. I'm honored.